Welcome to the Anchored Podcast. Have you ever wondered how to stay grounded in your faith amid heartache, confusion, and a seemingly mass exodus of people leaving the faith? My name is Roseanne Dawes.
And I'm Stephanie Frankham. And we've discovered that being anchored in Jesus Christ is the key to navigating these rough waters. Join us as we explore how their faith and covenants have helped each of our guests navigate the storms of life.
Hello, and welcome to our Anchored Podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to introduce Jedd to you so that we can hear his story.
Jedd Morley is my older brother, and we're so excited to have him. And, when we were talking about who we're going to get on the podcast, I'm like, I've got to share, we've got to get Jedd on here because if there's someone I know who literally has embraced faith and just trusting along the way, especially if he doesn't have all the answers, he stays committed to figuring it out. And one thing that I've noticed, I think I even mentioned this on Elisa's podcast. So we had Elisa earlier, a few weeks ago, and one thing about them is they have stayed true to studying the recent conference talks from their marriage 30 years ago, 30 years ago, 31 years ago. And yeah, he has been so inspiring and an example to me because he's never said this, but what I have observed is because he's such an internal thinker and I know he's in the heart a lot. What he studies, he really wants to know and he really wants to understand. And so I'm sure he spends a lot of time thinking about that as he's out building houses and doing different things that he loves to do. And I'm excited to hear what he has to say today.
So do you want to just tell us just a little bit about yourself? Just an introductory couple of things so it puts you in context.
Okay. I was born to Richard and Diane Morley. Dad was a seminary teacher for 30 years, and so I grew up with that background. Mom was a school teacher also, fourth grade, and just into music a lot. Everything she did was music-based. And as a result, and the grandkids and everything we do seems to be tied to music somehow, even though I don't play the piano or hardly any instruments. I do love to sing, but not for lack of effort on her part. Yeah, I got a story or two about that, but you may get a feel for who I am maybe by one of those. But anyway, went to school. It took me, I like to say it took me 10 years to get a 4-year degree. After high school, I graduated in 89 and graduated with my bachelor's in 99, just because of a lot of different changes in the structure and also my major. And so the structure meaning went from the quarter system to the semester system. And so a lot of my credits were not accepted that I had done earlier. I met Elisa when she was just barely turned 18, and we got married right then. And anyway, we had 4 kids by the time we graduated from college, and just worked for a short time in Ephraim and have been back here in Price for the last since 2001. So the last 25 years we've been back here in Price. So pretty much born here. I wasn't born here, but lived here since I was 4 or 5 and off for a few years, but back here in Price. So this is my home. And worked for the church for 20 years. And eventually went off on my own and have been doing real estate and construction for the last 3 or 4 years. And was recently made a bishop 2 years ago. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But anyway, maybe that's more than you wanted, but that's rough background.
You're good. Do you have any children?
We have 6 children. Yeah, we had 4, like I said, before we graduated, and then we adopted our last one So he's an adopted. Joseph is our last, and we adopted him when he was 3 days old, and that's also been an adventure. I might add that we've had 12 exchange students over those years, which has been awesome to get to know each of them, and we hope to go visit them
When you have those exchange students, how long do they stay?
for a year. Yeah,
Wow.
each one. We've had a couple that were just for the summer, but we've had a couple of those come back, and but typically a year.
And did you ever have more than one at a time?
Uh, we had, yeah, um, kind of. I mean, they came and they were with us, and then another one came, and then the first one left. So not for a long time, just for a couple of months maybe, but
Okay. Wonderful. Well, I am so excited to hear your story. If you just want to jump in and talk to us about how you have been anchored in Jesus Christ.
yeah. So I think I'll start. Um, I guess just as a kid growing up in the church, and where my dad was a seminary teacher, and he taught us. They're certainly goodly parents, and I do appreciate them more as time goes on. And they were pretty strict, I would say, and we um, either towed the line or were in trouble. But they were probably just what we needed. I was fairly rebellious, I think, as a young kid. I think I somehow I got this reputation of just being mean to my younger sisters, to Rose and Marcia. They, I think they put up with me a lot, and I know my grandma's my grandma Bean in particular. She seemed to. We lived at her house for a few years when when I was probably 4 to 7 or 8, and yeah, she just said, "Oh, that Jedd, that guy's getting those girls in trouble all the time." But I do remember a couple of experiences I might share. I remember once when we had just moved into the home that we grew up in. The house was on. Dad was he taught seminary during the school year, but in the summers he did construction stuff. So we laid a lot of brick and did some concrete, and he was in the middle of building the house that we grew up in, and so it was unfinished for 10 years. And we just would work on it when he had time and when he had the money to do it. And so that was a slow process. We had several bathrooms with no doors on them for years. And our bedrooms were just plywood that was painted, so it was a kind of a interesting growing up, but we weren't hurt by it at all, I don't think. But I do remember working with, uh, in one of the many occasions that I was just angry with Rose and Marsh. I remember sitting um, on the tile. As you come into our front door, there's a little tile entryway, and you go up a few stairs, and there's some more tile there. And then we had just a giant window that was there. And I was just angry. This is going to be awful.
This is the one
Bottom
thing
line
about
is,
Jedd. He is so sentimental, but he's spent a lot of time thinking about these things, and this is what I love about you.
yeah, but I can't express it is the problem. So the bottom line is, I remember controlling. I can I can control my anger since that day. Oh gosh, I remember it was a deliberate choice, um, to to just sit there and just kind of sit in it for a while with my teeth. Yeah, with my teeth clenched. Oh gosh. Anyway, um, just shaking my head, staring at him in the face. And then eventually dealing with it, having it gradually subside. And I don't know that I've ever been, uh, I don't think Rose even knows about that, probably. But since that day,
How old were we? Because I don't know any time I've ever made you mad.
yeah, right. I would guess I was 8 to 10. I don't remember exactly. But I do remember I've not been an angry person ever since then. I I think it's been a blessing. I think God has he knew what I was trying to do and has blessed me ever since then.
So what was it that actually, I mean, what happened in that moment? Was it something that you felt, something that you heard, something, I mean, what gave you
I,
that courage
to be angry or to deal with it?
to deal with it and to even have that desire?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. Other than my home was not one of contention. It didn't grow up with that. I mean, there was certainly uh, fights here and there, but nothing serious. There wasn't a lot of um, contention. There just wasn't a lot of it, and I don't like being that angry. I don't like being that. I just didn't like how it felt. I think that's probably why I tried to stay away from it. And I think I knew I was getting that reputation with my sisters, and I didn't like that either. And so having, I don't know, I just wanted better, I suppose. I don't know exactly that there's anything specific about that. But along those same lines, mom tried to teach us all piano, and I did okay for the first couple of years. I probably know the theory better than my fingers know the notes. But after a while, I just didn't want to do it. And mom was tired of me complaining about taking piano lessons. And so she would send me to one of her good friends. And she would take me and after she would just tell me to go there after school to go get my piano lesson. And I wouldn't. And so, how was Jedd today's piano? Oh, he didn't show up. What? Where is he? So she would drive me to the door and walk up the steps, and I would pretend to knock on the door, and then she would drive off, and then I would walk away. How was the lesson today? Oh, he didn't show up. I dropped him off. I know he's there. And so it's my own fault. I don't know how to play the piano any better. But I just, I don't think I could be forced to do a lot of things if I didn't want to. And I think I've kind of taken that. I guess one of my philosophies is that we spent eternity or eons of time in the pre-existence fighting for our agency, and I wasn't about to give it up now. And so it when we had our own kids, I think Elisa sometimes felt that I was sometimes too laid back and wasn't as involved, or I certainly don't like to repeat myself over and over about getting stuff done. And so I just wouldn't. And sometimes she didn't like that because she wanted to push a little harder than I was willing to. But bottom line is, I think understanding parts of the pre-existence has been a blessing to me, and just my attitudes and philosophies about who I am and what my potential is. I do think that it's given me a degree of confidence, and sometimes um, I knew that I should be doing better than I was. Maybe that's guilt or shame, I don't know, but I um, knew that I wasn't living up to my potential, and I didn't want to promote that or propagate that. So
With your
anyway,
agency and knowing that that was such a prized possession, and knowing that nobody can make you do anything, like you kind of have that, I'm right there with you. But like, how have you been able to transfer that with your children and their choices? That understand.
well, it's been a big deal for me. I mean, our kids uh, make choices that I don't necessarily agree with from time to time, and their teenage years, and I've it's hard to know when to make that transition from being kind of a dictator in your home and forcing, you can physically pick them up and move them and keep them where you want them, to just being a counselor, and especially as they're getting married now, you don't have much choice. I just give them counsel if they want it. If they invite, I can invite them to things that we're doing, and in the end, it's their choice whether they come or not to any family activities or an event that we're doing. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it feels unfair, and sometimes it's disappointing. But we are glad when they do come, and we're happy. And honestly, I think it's preserved our relationship with them, especially during those teenage years when they're a little rebellious and we're trying to find that balance. Uh, I think we've leaned more towards preserving the relationship with them than forcing gospel principles and things that I believe will be better for them in the long run, and letting them kind of choose for themselves and deal with the natural consequences, and then trying not to say I told you so. I mean, they kind of picked that up on their own, and like, and I've heard them. I wish I would have. Me too, you know. But it's that's been successful for us, I think, in trying to find that balance. And I do think we have a good relationship with all of our kids, which I'm grateful for. So yeah, that's how that's translated. Just out of high school, I had a buddy that's always been a little eccentric. He wanted to shave our heads and go to Alaska helicopter logging. And so we did that. And we shaved our heads and had a reverse mohawk for a while. That's what we called it. We went and pulled a bunch of trees and stuff out of the limbs of the rivers and stuff that were in the Alaskan mountains, off Ketchikan and different places up there. But um, I had a couple of really good experiences there. And we were just before my mission. I was trying to earn money for a mission. And we were working every day, 12-hour days, because it was summer and it was light in Alaska a long time and half the night. And our crew chief, I remember I was working with my cousin Richard at the time, and he was also preparing for his mission. And we told him we'd rather not work on Sunday. Is there any way that we could not work on Sunday? And he said, yeah, there's a way, but it'll cost you some wages, and it'll cost you some, benefits that you would normally get otherwise. And we agreed to that. I think that stumped him. I remember reading just in Mosiah, and scripture came up about keeping the Sabbath day holy, and we shared that with him. And as a 18-year-old kid, that was scary for me. And I was glad for Richard being kind of led out on that. But I was grateful and kind of followed along. And just to give you a feel for some of those guys, we would work for 2 weeks straight, and then they would get a weekend off, and they would all fly down to Ketchikan and come back absolutely penniless. They had nothing. They were spending it all on drugs and women and gambling and whatever. We were lives from time to time just working on the landing, the helicopter logging, right? So they're flying these big old logs. They just drop them. They hit the landing and fall over, and then these big old front loader with forks would come and pick up these big logs, and they're high half the time. And you're dodging logs and big old chain, cables that are tied to these things. And I do think the Lord protected us in the middle of that. But it was interesting to see the lifestyle that I'd never seen before. And I knew I did not want that. They would come back with nothing. And here we are trying to save money for our missions. And I loved them. They were good people. But they had some addictions that they were struggling with, and some attitudes that I couldn't agree with. And I knew that it wasn't blessing their lives. And I knew I did not want that.
How did
And
you
so,
stay strong during that time with that just completely surrounding your entire environment?
well, I guess that's why the Lord sends them in two, because there was always two of us, right? I had my buddy, Steve Hardman was with me for the first half of it. And then I was with Richard the second half, and we leaned on each other, and we were reading our scriptures daily and listening to, I think it was Alan Jackson. I don't like country music that much, but Rich does. And so we listen to a lot of country stuff, and just kept our minds on better things than what they were doing. And so I think that combination, you have quite a bit of alone time too. If you're out in the mountains, I was what they call a hooker. And they had this giant hook that would swing down, and you would wrap up a giant tree with the cable, this 8-foot diameter tree that sometimes they would buck them every 8 feet. And so you'd wrap this giant cable around and try to not get slammed by this giant hook, and hook, and at the same time hook the cable onto it without getting shocked from all the static electricity that had built up on it. And so doing all of that, and then getting out of the way when they started lifting up these giant logs. So I loved it. I'm fairly athletic. I enjoyed running away from, the challenge of it all. I enjoyed all that. But when you're waiting for the helicopter to come, you had some downtime and alone time. And I love being out in the woods and praying or reading or thinking about just good things, I think.
Do you think you were just born that way, that you just naturally like to think of things of God or your connection to Him? Have you always just felt that?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I do think that I think everyone has the light of Christ in them, and it's going to eventually bring them to moments of reflection and considering eternal things and things of God. And so those were opportunities for me. As far as much as I did it, I think part of that is being raised the way I was. So there's some environmental effects of that. But I do think to some extent I don't like conflict and I like having a peaceful heart, and and maybe that contributes to that. So yes, in both counts.
Yeah, it seems like to me like that's I've gentle, and mom always called you Gem, for Jedd, the Gem,
Uh-huh.
Jemmy. And
Yeah.
because of things like that, she also saw that in you too, just that gentleness, that
Yeah, I do think I'm a little more mellow than and less coarse maybe than my brother or dad. But I don't know where that comes from other than probably from her. Yeah. She would always make me take naps and I hated that. I remember as a 4 and 5 year old just hating to take naps, and she would hold me for hours. And so,
which is probably 20 minutes.
no, it had to be hours. It might, who knows? But I do think just that calming influence was part of that.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So there's a part of that logging story that I remember.
Okay.
Maybe you do want to share, or maybe you don't, but one time you got paid.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we got like I say, we got paid every couple of weeks, and they would come back penniless, and we would just save ours, and there was no place to cash a check or no, get the cash or anything. So I had several months of wages stolen on the first the first few weeks we were there. I had no idea where it went, and that was disappointing, and nobody ever fessed up to it. And but that was, you know, you start wondering about your mission and your purpose of being there, and you're trying to earn money to pay your own way, and stuff like that happens, and you know that somebody there has done it, and it was just frustrating.
Yeah.
So that
So what
the
did
other
you
thing,
do? How did you get through that? How did you navigate that issue?
um again, I think just talking to Richard, and again, I think it comes down to agency. The Lord's not going to stop their agency, and He's going to continue to give me my agency. And I know that this life is a time of challenge and to be tested. And I guess I just figured that was one of mine, and that I needed to just learn from that. But finances has been just a big problem for me. I've It's been on my mind my whole life. I think I define part of my success based on the finances that I am able to get and acquire. And I think for whatever reason, the Lord just has not, I feel like we've always had enough. We've been able to do most of the things that we've wanted to do. But somehow I just haven't felt like uh, he's blessed us with that for whatever reason. So
And that's been frustrating.
it's been super frustrating, and I'm trying to figure out still, I think, why not? What is it that what about my character or my nature, or because I know that he can, and I know that he has for others, and it's not necessarily a transactional type thing, right? Because I'm trying to live how I'm supposed to. And yet I know I serve my mission in South Africa, and they have nothing down there. They're living in their townships, they're in shanties, and they've got their makeshift weapons, and they none of them have cars, and they're all trying to go to work in these Volkswagen bugs. The taxis are all these little Volkswagen buses, those little buses. And they have taxi wars down there. At least they did back in the 90s, early 90s, when I was there, just right before apartheid. And the taxi wars, they would just blow each other up. And this taxi company was fighting against this taxi company, and you just see burned, blown up combis or the taxis all over the roads. And I was glad I didn't have to ride those. But the bottom line is, I know that the great majority of the world is worse off than we are. And yet somehow I still feel like it's not enough. So,
And you've
and
had
yet,
some really amazing conversations with God through this.
oh yeah,
Out,
oh yeah,
and with all of that, what do you hear him saying to you?
be patient.
This is what I love about Jedd. He just trusts. Even though there's frustration and whatnot with this, he just, okay, trust. Gonna go build this house now.
Yeah.
So, besides financial, what challenges have you seen in your life where you've had to lean in to God and his promises? Where has he shown up in your journey?
Well, I think I really, I think I'm pretty simple. There's really just a couple of things that are real trials for me, but they affect everything. And I think finances is one of those. And the other one is probably just um, temptations of the flesh. Just learning how to control this body, my mind, my uh, my heart. Um, I think between those two, probably are where my biggest uh, sources of pain and guilt and frustration has come from. So I think Elisa has been a super big help with that. She's really positive, and it appears to me that she finds positive in things that I don't see. It's just yeah, we're talking about, we might sit down and have a gratitude session and try to come up with stuff, and I'm just like, you're counting that? Or when we talk about being wealthy or rich and or whatever, and she's always talking about we've got good kids and they're making good choices, and I'm like, whoop-de-doo, that's yes, you're right, they are, they're wonderful, and I love them, I'm grateful for them. Okay. I can see your point, but it's, I guess, not what I'm looking for. um I guess I've always thought that looking at the small miracles was kind of a cop out. You're not getting the big ones, and so the little ones are, okay, I'll give you that just as a token blessing. But I'm coming to realize that they're more important, and but again, it's harder for me to recognize that and be grateful for that. Uh, and here I am. I'm working for the church as a facility manager here in Price. We're taking care of about all the church properties in 4 counties in Utah: the Carbon, Emery, Grand, and Wayne. And there's about 100 properties there. And it's a wide variety of things too. It's girls' camps and bishop storehouses, family history center, meeting houses, uh, bishop storehouses, all those different types of properties. And uh, I'm getting in trouble all the time at work. And I think, again, because of the money situation, the church pays adequately. It's never enough for what I wanted. And I didn't feel like we ever had enough really to go on vacations or to do things that I wanted to do. And so it just felt like my nose was to the grindstone all the time. And yet, on the other hand, we did have enough. We raised our family, and it was secure job, and it was great to um, work for the church. The environment was great, but I just had this entrepreneurial desire to do more than that, and it got me in trouble all the time because my skill set is construction, and that's what I was doing for the church. And so everything I tried to do was a conflict of interest. And so they stopped me from doing probably 10 or 15. It seems like every year I had a new idea, and I would just get in trouble for trying it. And I just felt squelched, and it was frustrating. And so, uh, and I get it. I mean, I understand where they're from. They don't want anything to appear like we're taking advantage of the church's system or their influence. And I wasn't trying to, but those were the rules that they had set up. And so trying to balance that was difficult for those 20 years that I worked for the church.
When you had that time that you were working with the church and you're feeling that frustration and so forth, how did that affect your testimony?
There's kind of a saying that your testimony is never challenged more than when you work for the church. Right? Because you're going to have conflict, and there's going to be things that happen that you don't agree with, and but I don't think any of that. I knew all of that was business, right? There's the church, there's the ecclesiastical side, there's the testimony side, and then there's just business. And some of the leaders of the church are not, or the leaders of the business side are not the apostles and not the 70 who are giving that other instruction. I think there's some wisdom in trying to separate that, the corporation of the presiding bishop separate from, I mean, obviously they're overseeing all of that, but I don't know, maybe I've got a skewed sense of how much they're involved. But I know that we had to send in tons of reports, and they did tons of audits. And so I know that they see all of that. It's just um, the details of it are sometimes difficult to show or express, and then they just have different opinions than I do or some of the other facility managers. And so you just kind of say, okay, this is part of the job I don't like, but doesn't every job have things you don't like? That's kind of how I viewed it, is there's always things that are good and bad in every job, and you kind of take the bad with the good. So there came a time after about those 20 years when I was considering leaving church employment, and I only dared to do that. Well, there's a couple of things that happened. One day I was getting up and was leaving to go to work, and just checked the mail, and there was a Book of Mormon in our mailbox. And the Book of Mormon, as I was just kind of reading through it, there was $100 bill in one of the pages. I was like, man, that's awesome. Thrilled about that. And so, and there was a scripture marked. And so I read the scripture about that. And I didn't think much of it. I, was grateful and kind of wondered who had done it or whatever, but took the book to work with me. And a little bit later, I was still kind of in awe about that, and picked it up and was reading it, kind of thumbing through the pages, and found another $100 bill in there. And I was like, whoa, how many are there? So I'm like, now I'm going through pretty particular, and there's $1,000 in there that someone had just dropped off at our front door. And I took it as I was considering leaving church employment anyway, and the church had just offered an incentive program for people to kind of exit church employment. And because they were making some administrative changes. And so I was really considering that. And that was just kind of a boost. And on top of that, our kids were pretty much grown, and Elisa had gotten a job that would have some additional benefits for us, as far as actually having benefits if I left. And so, oh man, that was 6 months of praying and trying to make that decision, to make that leap, to do that. And we decided together that I would be happier doing. I remember driving down to Moab on one particular day. Moab's about 2 hours from Price, and I had a lot of I had a lot of time to think driving to all these facilities. I was listening to the Prince of Egypt, Deliver Us. And I just felt like I was in the mud and being whipped, and wondering, where's the land you promised me, a son of the covenant, a child of Israel? And I think I think that emotion and there's that, and there's a number of music playing a major role in all of that. It gives me the emotion that and the confidence, the courage to step out and try something new, and knowing I had the full faith and support of my wife was a major factor in that as well. But it was about that same time that I've always had a heart murmur, and it got worse right there, right during COVID. And I felt like I was just having some chest pain. I like I said, I like to play ball in the mornings. And so I got done playing my basketball in the morning and went to work, and just having some chest pain. And it was awful that day. And so I told my secretary, I'm having some chest pain. She's like, you better go to the hospital. I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, I decided to go and step in the emergency room and say, yeah, you have to wait forever in the emergency room. It drives me crazy. But I'm in there waiting. And so finally I get up to the front desk and I say, yeah, I'm having some chest pain. She's like, oh. Suddenly people are walking a little faster and doing
you
So
know,
they
for
get me
future
right
visits.
in. They get me right in and start doing a bunch of tests, and they say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna life flight you up to Provo." And I'm all right, well, you better let me tell my wife, I'm still feeling all right. I'm just having these chest pains. Dear, I guess they're gonna fly me up to Provo. What? She didn't know I even went to the hospital. So anyway, they told me that I was having a heart attack, and that they needed to do open heart surgery right away. And it was interesting as the news spread that I was in the hospital. I really believe that I could feel the prayers of in my behalf. When the brethren say that they feel the prayers of the saints, I know that to be true. There is a power that comes from people praying for you, and the same with the temple, uh, putting people's names in the temple. And it was also interesting, I to just, I think, realize more the influence that I had had on nieces and nephews. As my siblings, their parents told them about what was going on with me, and their reaction. So I was grateful for that too. Turns out that I didn't have a heart attack, and that it was just a virus, and they didn't need to do open heart surgery, but that I did have a heart murmur, a valve that was leaking badly, and they were just going to monitor that for a while. A couple of years later, that's about when I was trying to decide whether or not to leave the church. But Elisa had found a job. The only time in our life when we had had two sets of insurances at the same time. And so I had the surgery when we had the insurance. And I just thought, what a coincidence that the only time in our life when we've really been a pretty healthy family. We haven't had a lot of major medical issues. And so I choose to believe when it comes to tithing. I remember Elder Bednar's talk that he spoke about his mother and reviewing her checkbook, that they really couldn't identify specific blessings regarding the tithing, but that they had been healthy, and that their washer machine had lasted 20 years, and that their cars had 350,000 miles on it. And as I thought about that, I thought, man, that's the same as I've got a truck with 350,000 miles on it. It's older than I am, but it runs. And I've got, we've had the same washer all growing up, our kids. And we bought this old house that had a furnace in it, and it's still working. I mean, we've never changed the roof. Actually, we changed it this year, but it's lasted our whole married life. And I think, well, gosh, is that just a coincidence? Because one more. We I don't know why we ever did this. My wife, when my wife was, we had during our kids' teenage years, she in her family, she's got her dad and two siblings married her mom and two of her siblings. So there's a lot of double cousins going on, right? Both sides of the family. And they live on the ridge down in Blanding. And there's, I don't know, there must have been 20 or 30 teenagers from all of the descendants. I mean, it was like a whole school bus going to school, the high school. It was, and we thought, man, we're missing out. And we wouldn't mind living in Blanding. And so Lisa was going to go down and live in Blanding. And if we found a job down there, then I would go down and join them. But for 4 years, I went and lived with mom and dad. So we rented our house. And while it was being rented out, uh, it started settling really bad. And so I just thought, what is going on? And the insurance was saying, no, it's a previous condition and we're not going to cover it. And I'm thinking, this is going to totally sink us. I mean, if we can't live in the house and we still have a mortgage payment that we've got to pay, this is not going to, we're doomed. I mean, financially, that is going to devastate us. But in the end, the insurance company paid 90% of it. They dug up the whole house, the whole perimeter, 8 feet deep, and put helical piers under the foundation every 8 feet all the way around the house. I mean, that costs more than the house just to do that structural work. And now we've got the best house in the neighborhood. I mean, as far as structural goes, because of and I'm just thinking to myself, another one with the life flight to there, the insurance wasn't going to pay for that ambulance service because for whatever reason, but they ended up paying for that. It's just thing after thing after thing, and I'm thinking all these years of paying tithing, I don't remember any blessings, but truly been miraculous. And so why do I stay in the church? And for me, the question is not why do I stay, it's why do I do what I'm doing, right? Why do I pay my tithing? Or why do I try to fast each month? Why do I try to just be to do the service that I'm doing, right? We had the Worldwide Service Day a couple of months ago, and I just found myself in a yard of a lady that is trying to do her whole yard by herself and has been for years. And here I am. We've been there multiple times as a ward doing service projects for her. And yet here we are again. And I'm just, why? And then in the afternoon, most everybody went home around noon. And it wasn't done, what we had planned to do. And so I'm back there again. And I'm just thinking, why am I doing this? Feeling a little alone. Sometimes as a bishop, I feel a little bit alone, increased. And that's the other thing too. I wanted greater flexibility than I had with my time working with the church. And so that was part of the decision that if I left and I was able to support myself, I would give more time to service. And so here's my opportunity, and I'm trying to decide if I'm grumpy about that or not, and trying to make a decision. And honestly, it is a choice. And I found, and I continue to do that on a regular basis. I find myself evaluating, okay, we've got these things that need to be done. I've invited and tried to delegate. Sometimes they follow through, sometimes they don't. And it still falls back on me. And so you just I guess you have a choice on how you're going to handle that. I do have the time. It's not convenient, but I do have the time, and that's, what something I'm extremely grateful for. I feel a huge burden lifted because of the time that I do have, even though don't have the finances we hope for. We're still able to survive, and I do have the flexibility, which is huge. But again, why am I doing it? I think it's because I do feel better. I've never enjoyed service, to be honest, right? I mean, people always say, yeah, I go do the service and you always hate getting there, but when you do get there, you always feel better afterwards. And I'm like, not for me. But I'm learning. I guess that's the other attitude I'm trying to figure out is what's it, what's heaven like? What's it going to be like in heaven? If God is in heaven and all he does is serve his kids, I better figure out service, right? I mean, I better figure out how to enjoy that and how to make that heavenly because I'm not there. And
So why do you keep with it? I mean, I'm thinking this conversation I had with my husband the other day, and we thought, if we are all aiming to become gods and goddesses, I can't deal with the 7 I've got. I don't feel like
yeah,
I have them figured out. Why would I want to do that? But
yeah,
ultimately, I want to become like my Father in heaven because I love him dearly.
well,
So why
yeah.
do you stick with it?
He says it'll make me happy. And sometimes I'm happier than others, but it's enough to keep doing it. And honestly, I think when we finally figure out a Zion community and everyone is trying and everyone is making time and everyone is uh, that's contributing what they can, then I think it's easier. I often, not often, but well, pretty often, I think about the Zion and we're supposed to be a one people. And, I've got 2 daughters. I've got my daughter, Sarah. She's a 6'1", strong, athletic, uh, determined, and strong woman. And then I've got my daughter, Diana, who's still pretty tall. She's 5'10", but she's dainty, right? She is small and is a healer. She has a healing touch and just a soothing way of talking to you. And I'm thinking, well, our family does a lot with athletics, right? And so I think, okay, if I'm going to move this pile of dirt, that's not really athletics, but bottom line is physical. If I'm going to move this pile of dirt, what effort is that going to require from Sarah? And what effort would that require from Diana? And although the official amount of work required is the same, the effort required from them just because of their physical makeup is very different. And so I have to think of my gifts and my talents, that I've been given, whatever it is, 2 or 3 talents. Others have been given 5, others have been given 1. And am I doing what I can with mine? I think I just have to be, that's one way I try to remind myself to keep myself from judging others too harshly when I don't feel like they're measuring up to what they ought to be. Is just the effort required from me may not be what's required from them based on their background, the influences they had growing up, and their understanding of gospel principles is going to be different than mine. And I need to be careful about how I view others. So one more, maybe this week in Sunday school, we had a lesson about the brother of Jared. And the 3 things they needed, right? The air, the light, the steering. And in one case, he said, no, here's your agency. You can go out and you figure that one out. I'll take care of it. Here's how you do the air one. Gave him kind of a step-by-step how to figure out the air situation. And the steering, nope, I'm just going to blow you there. Send the waves and send you there. So different ways of answering prayers. And I remember trying to decide whether or not to marry Elisa. Oh man, I prayed for a lot. And I just don't felt like I ever really got an answer. And so she doesn't like to hear that because she got a definite answer. But I'm like, I'm sorry, but I didn't get an answer. But I know I love you, and I know I want to be with you. And I just think sometimes the Lord lets us be the creator. That I was able to choose her and be with her. Yeah, I'm glad for that.
I remember I was working in Cedar City. So Brian and I had been married. We went to school down there, and you came and you were contemplating whether to marry Elisa or not. And I remember the scripture that you quoted, and you said, if I truly love her, then love casteth out all fear. I shouldn't be afraid of any of this. And that was 30 plus years ago. And just, you've always just trusted in the word of the Lord. You've always just trusted, just like, why do you stay? You're like, well, he says, I'm going to be happy. Why do I keep doing that? He's just going to be happy. And that's the thing that I just love and admire about you is even if it's not answered the way that you want or that you think, you still trust him and you choose to trust him. That seems to be the theme all the way through this today, is just how powerful that choice is and that agency to choose to believe and all of that. So Jedd, thank you so much for sharing your testimony, and you've answered our big question of why do you stay? Why do you keep doing it? We just so appreciate your time today and giving us some things to think about, and just continue working with the Lord in our individual experiences. We appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much,
I hope
Jedd.
it's helpful.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in again to this episode to listen to his wonderful testimony. And if you have a story that you would like to share, you can contact us at anchoredinChristpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to be able to put you on and let you share your testimony and your conviction and your trust of why you are anchored in Jesus Christ. And if you will subscribe and share, we would love to be able to get these messages out and to lift others. Thank you so much for joining us today.